Here we have our Citica 200D that we disassembled in the previous video. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to reassemble it with fresh oil and fresh grease. What I've done so far is, after I took it out the ultrasonic washer, I checked everything. I checked all the gears, I checked all the bearings, everything's good to go and everything's ready to be reassembled. So now it's time to start reassembling with fresh oil and fresh grease. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a light coat of grease inside the body here, paying special attention to where the kick out plate rubs and slides, as well as where the thumb bar is going to run. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is probably what's going to be the most difficult portion of reassembling this reel, and that's going to be the worm gear, assembly. So the first thing that I want to do is attach the idle gear to the worm gear shaft. That's the first piece. Set that down. I'm only going to need one of these 3 pin shafts. I'm going to need the line guide itself, as well as the shaft. And just to kind of get started, I'm going to set this in there. This first pin has to go through the line guide, and that's going to help keep everything sort of aligned as best as possible. And you can put the E-clip that we took out of it on it. It goes on the palm plate side. So I'm going to snap that into place, and that's going to keep this line guide here from falling out, and it's going to help us keep everything aligned. But it's still going to be tough. This is still going to be a tough thing to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the sleeve in the way the groove fits in here for the shroud. We're going to try to put that in here first, like that. Oh man, this is not easy. Okay, and it fell out, of course. So then I kind of have it in the groove. I'm going to hold it in place and try to use my index finger to put the palm side cap on, and you can see here that it has a groove as well for the shield. Okay, kind of making sure everything stays aligned. From there, I'm going to push the worm gear so I have everything aligned like it needs to be. No, I don't. Of course not. There we go. So everything's aligned like it needs to be. I'm going to push that worm gear through. I'm going to put the washer on and snap that E-clip in. into place. If I can get it out from the groove that it fell in. What I'll do right here is I'm going to put just a little drop of oil put that E-clip in place. And then snap it in. So now the worm gear is assembled. So now that we snap that E-clip in place, everything should stay together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pawl into the line guide. Oops. Put the pawl in. I'm going to put my finger over it while I turn the gear out here with my thumb so that it gets in there. I'm going to put that small washer on top of it. I like to put a half a drop of grease, put that pawl cap on. Be careful not to cross thread it. And so now it's on. From here, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to push these other two pins in. Using my tweezers to make sure that they line up. Nope. So now that those are in, I can start to put the thumb bar on next. So put the thumb bar on, put the arm for the thumb bar on. I'm going to get the screw that screws the thumb bar onto the arm. Holding it in place. Put that screw in. Going through the body of the reel. Tightening that screw down. Now, you should have a small short screw that fits in this hole that kind of catches the edge of that plate, that arm. And now all of that's together. Put the cam and brakes on. You're going to need only one spring in that first kick out arm. I mean the only spring and the kick out arm. In the body of the reel there's a small hole right here, and that's where the spring goes. You want to make sure you don't put it upside down, so the short end goes in that body hole. There's a hole on the kick out arm, you want to put it pin side up. Now we greased all of this. You're going to want to make sure that your thumb bar is pushed up. I like to take the cam and start it by putting it over the pin, and then I'm going to push down and rotate it until it falls into place. So you have to make sure that this kick out, the thumb bar lever arm, is where it's supposed to be, and that the kick out arm is where it's supposed to be. So I put my finger on it there. This is where we insert this bearing. what I'm going to do real quick is put just a little drop of oil in the bearing, work it in there. So that bearing fits in that slot. This is your post plate. Sorry. So put your post plate in, and you can see the grooves that are cut out on it are going to line up with the screw holes. So I'm going to take my first screw, screw that one in, but I'm not going to tighten it real tight down. I'm going to take my second screw, line that one up. Now I'm going to screw it all the way down and tight so that everything is tight. You can take your thumb off of it now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a little touch of grease on here, not a whole lot. And I'm going to wait. No. So what I'm going to put on next is the yoke and the pinion gear. There's some angled ramps on the underneath of it, and I just like to put just a little touch of grease there to help it slide. Now you have to put the pinion gear facing up so the fat piece goes down. Put that yoke into place with the pinion gear, and I'm going to wait to put these springs on the post until after I do the drive shaft. So to reassemble the drive shaft, I need the actual drive shaft itself. I need the white plastic gear. I need the mounting plate. I need the bearing. There's a brass washer next, and then finally the C-clip, and then I try to line up that bearing, that brass washer, push everything down, and then pop that E-clip or C-clip on. Okay, so now that that's reassembled, you can put it into the body of the reel, making sure that the teeth line up with the worm gear teeth. You should have your 2 screws that screw into here. Oh. First one. There's the second one lined up. So now the drive shaft is on, but we still have to do all the drive gears. So that's next. Okay. So I went ahead from this point forward, but I had made a mistake, and I forgot to put the palm side plate on before I put the gears and everything else on. So the first thing I have to do to put this back together is put this pressure plate in, this compression plate in, and make sure it falls into that slot. Put a little drop of oil, and then what I'm going to need to do is put this bearing in. I'm going to put this retainer clip in. And then I'm going to push this shaft through the body of the reel. And then I'm going to lock it in place. I'm going to get my little E-clip that I stored here for safekeeping. I'm going to attach that to the end of the shaft. Push that E-clip on. Now, I want to put all this back on, but I have all that whole process already recorded, but the handle, the palm side plate was not on it. So you're going to watch that now, even though that's not done yet. So this next part involves a couple of different things. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this kick out gear and this anti-reverse dog, and this dog has a slot that the gears are going to ride inside of, and this anti-reverse dog, the hole on it is going to fit on this post. So this anti-reverse dog has got to fit on this post here while still being on the kick out gear. So I use two hands. I slide it in between two of the teeth as I go on. I make sure that I line this hole up with that post that it needs to sit on, and then I try to rotate the drive shaft till it locks in place, because the drive shaft is square and the hole for the kick out gear is square. So now that those in place, I'm going to get my drag grease. Let me zoom out. And I'm going to use the small drag washer here. I'm going to put just a fingertip's worth of grease. Just kind of rub it in there lightly. And that's going to go on top. Set that aside. And then I'm going to take the drive gear, which is nice and clean. There's no imperfections. I've already checked the teeth. Everything should ride smooth. I'm going to run a bead of grease about halfway. This is not the same grease as the drag grease. This is, what I happen to be using here is the known as the Daiwa Space Age greaser. But if what you have is the Ardent Real Butter tubes, that works as well. So what I do is I just run a bead on top of the threads, on top of the teeth of the gear, and then I run my finger and I push them in, push it into the teeth until I get about halfway around the gear. I'll push it off of the edges here and just kind of make sure that it's evenly distributed on all the teeth. Adding where I need to add. I'll take my dry finger and I'll get any of that blue grease out. And then I'm going to put this straight on the drive shaft. What I do is I put my other finger over and hold the pinion gear in place and kind of pull pull it back so that I can slide this drive gear on, and it'll fall into place. Make sure I wipe any of that blue grease off of my fingers. I'm going to get some drag grease. I use the cow's drag grease. Just another fingertip's worth. And I'll run it into that drag washer. Not putting a whole lot. Put that in place. I'm going to take the metal washer. This metal washer goes on top, but what you have to make sure is that on this one, there's one side is indented and one side is raised, that the raised side goes up. Slide that on. I'm going to close up my drag grease. And then this spool shaft is keyed to fit in that top drag washer. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take my one-way clutch bearing. Actually, here's one thing you can do is you can test what direction it needs to go in with the key, with the spool shaft. I'm going to push that back into this body here. No oil, no grease in this bearing. So push that in and all the way down. I'm going to take my 2 springs for the posts. Just a little bitty dab of grease. Put those on the posts. So now what I have to do here is I need to put one of these bearings, one of the 2 bearings that's left, back into the handle side of the plate. I'm going to roll this spring back in. You're going to hear it snap. I'm going to put a little drop of a little drop of oil on this plate. Put my cap on, but only a couple of turns. And so now, okay, so I have the drive gear on, the shaft, the 2 springs. I'm going to slide that face plate on, and I'm going to put the handle side plate on, and just slowly try to get that shaft sleeve to fit right. And I can see that it's flush everywhere that it goes. I know that this long screw goes through in the bottom. This little flat screw faces out. Now, what I need here is to open the palm side plate, and there's a screw with a smaller head on it. That should fit in that hole there to hold the face plate on. So then you can close that back. And then you have 3 screws left. This longer one should go all the way in the front. I know that I'm kind of going out of the order of the way that I took them apart. But you'll notice whenever you go to put it together, if you don't know what screw goes where, start off with the longest screw first and test the hole. If it's the wrong hole, the screw won't go in all the way. Don't force it. And then these 2 screws are the same length. So they are the 2 other screws. I'm going to tighten those down. So now, all these screws are tight. Next, I'm going to put the spool in. But first, I'm going to put just a little drop of oil on the very end of each one of these brakes. I'm going to push the spool in, and I'm going to close it, and that's going to make it easier for you to assemble all of this stuff, because it's going to help give the resistance that you need. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to lay out everything that I need ahead of time. So there's my nut, my screw, my back nut, my two washers. Now I know that I'm going to need this spring and this pin to go inside that hole, and this plate goes on top of it to make it a click plate. And so it has, so first I need to put these two washers on. You can notice that these two washers are grooved, and you want them to be facing each other like parentheses, and then that's how you want them to go in the drive shaft. So this first one is cupped this way, and you want to go in the drive shaft with that one first. This other one is cupped the opposite way, so that's how you want them to land on the drive shaft. Next, you're going to have this washer that's felt on one side and brass on the other. You want the brass to go down against the two washers that you just put on, and the softer side up against this brass nut. So you can put this on by hand. And then here's where things are going to start to get tricky. Okay, here's the spring. Here's the drag star. But we need to be able to put this spring and this pin in here. And this takes a great deal of patience. To put the spring in, to put the pin in the spring, what I like to do here is get it to where it'll fit onto that square nut that's in there. You're going to feel it whenever it goes down. I'm going to hold it with my other hand. This plate, this little plastic plate, has two sides. One side has the dimples in it. The dimples go down because that's what interacts with that pin that's spring loaded. Put my handle on, transfer my fingers onto the handle, and then tighten the nut down. This nut looks like it's ribbed. Make sure you don't cross thread it, but you want to maintain pressure so that spring doesn't pop out. Perfect. I'm going to tighten the drag just a little bit to give me some room to tighten down this nut. You want to try to pay attention to how all the holes line up on the inside of this cap. So I just need to go just a little bit. Maybe just a little bit more. Put the spring, put the screw on. I'm going to tighten that screw down. Now, I don't want to turn the handle too much at this point, because what I'm going to want to do is open the palm side plate, take the spool out. I'm going to close it so it doesn't get in the way. And then I need to grease the worm gear. So with the spool out of the way, I can really reach in there with my needle greaser. Not my needle greaser, my Daiwa greaser. And I can really start to put the grease where I need it with the spool out of the way. And then slowly turn the handle. Just kind of getting into it where I can. Try to coat that worm gear as much as I can. I might be able to do this with a spool in it. This is really hard to do on this reel, but I'm trying to get it where I can get it. There we go. Now it's got some grease in it. So we're gonna slowly turn the handle here, let that grease work in. I'm gonna add a little bit there. She spins fairly good. That's it. Now it's reassembled.